You're listening to Mark Langley's Horsemanship Podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping people find solutions in a calm, connected way. I'm Jenny Langley, and with me is Mark Langley. This week we're going to talk about horses that are going in long reins on the ground and then being converted from driving to undersaddle. There's going to be some great tips on how we can get both of these things going really well. Mark, we're going to start with the question that's come through from one of our members called Amanda, and she's been doing some long reining with her horse. So connected long reining, backing and turning. He's going really well in the long reins, but however, she's finding he's not going forward, and what he'll do is continue to turn and face her. So she stopped driving from behind some years ago since finding your methods, and she says thank you in brackets for that, but she's unable to get him to understand to go forwards. He'll go forward on one lead rope, okay, and so she's sort of unthinking that long reining is a gap in his early education. Is there something that she can do on her own, or is another person required to help lead him to get him past this stumbling block?
Yeah, good question. One area, especially with some of the really sort of, horses that don't have a lot of natural, need to move and they're pretty quiet, they just sort of go, well, I'll just stand here. Now, I'm not sure exactly what you meant by you stop driving from behind, as in, maybe you've stopped disengaging the hip by moving the hip out. So that disengagement, if people do the disengagement of the hind quarter too often and get the horse to face up, makes the horse think that when they're behind them, they should be facing up. So that can cause a horse to want to always face up. If you're saying I've given up driving from behind, well, I'm okay with driving from behind in a certain fashion. So when I drive like long rein a horse from behind, I might have a long stick with a flag on it over their back, and they can have me safely behind them. Like, they have to feel okay with me behind them to do this. And I might just cluck and create a little bit of sort of movement with the flag, much like the movement from the legs, like you can do it down the side of their ribs or top of their back. It doesn't really matter where the stimulant comes from. It's just a stimulant to say, hey, can you search and go, and go forward? Because when you ride, on a horse that's learning, you might squeeze or bump or wave your legs a little to get that horse to recognize that there's a stimulant coming from the rib cage area, and it's to search and go forward, because that's what they're taught when we ride them. So you can have a long stick over their back with a flag on it and just sort of do that bump, 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 cluck, cluck, and get them to sort of step forward a bit and learn that. The driving I sort of try and tell people not to do too much of is, oh, here's something coming, I better get away from it, and create distance from it all the time, because that can cause a flight response in a horse, and we can lose trust. But creating a stimulant that is coming from behind, the beside, on top of the horse, and getting it to move forward is perfectly fine, because it's much like riding and what we do when we just go out and move our horses under saddle. So if you're in the long reins, there's two things that I do. That's one of them, and I can do that with one rope on the side, and there's some videos of me just sort of, having a long flag on a horse, getting them to travel forward. You can do it with two reins when you're behind them. If the horse goes to turn around, you just correct the reins, because you're standing behind them, and you just put them back in the centre again so they can't turn around, and then try again until they search and go forward a bit until they find their forward. There's also ways that you can actually get them in a turnaround. So you walk down the side of their body, you've got two reins, and by the time you get down one side of their body, you've walked, like from their rump, you've walked around the side of their body up to about the shoulder. And then you start to pull that outside rein, which is going around the other side of their body. So they like turn away, but you walk forward like you're walking around with their shoulder and then you might cluck a little and might have a little stick on their back and go cluck, cluck, cluck. And then they might turn in a tight turn and then start to walk forward, because you're walking in a forward direction too. And that's another way of leading them into forward in a tight turn. And that's quite good. The other thing is, in the long reins, the biggest thing I see at clinics where people are struggling is they are just not quite clear enough in the reins. They pull, they release, they pull, they release, and then the horse moves a bit and they shuffle across a bit and go, oh, I've got to feel like I've got to be behind them. And there's a couple of little sort of things that people do that make the horse a little lost and confused. So if you go into the long reining videos, just watch some of the ones where the horse is centering up with the reins, and watch how I walk and move around the horse. I'm not pulling and releasing all the time. I'm not, doing that. I'm just wandering around, getting the horse to really find the center of those reins and know exactly where that center is. And just watch that clarity. And if you can watch that, then you'll start to see there might be things that you're doing that could be causing a bit of like touch and go. I'm moving here, and the horse goes, oh, well, I'll just face you. Okay. So there might be some things there. And I can't, with all the questions, the one thing I can't do is watch the person. I can only guess what's happening. But if you sort of see there's a bit more groundedness in my approach to it, try and find that groundedness in the reins so the horse is a lot more convinced where center is and what you're asking.
So when she does get the horse to go forward, presumably it could just be a small step. It won't necessarily be striding out around the arena.
Yep. So the next thing is when your horse does go forward, some horses go, oh, now I'm not focused on you all the time. I'm going to go to the other end of the arena, and then they'd march off. Well, then you've got to say to them, well, I'm going to let you go so many metres, but I've got to stop again. And that's when you anchor yourself and step them back. So they learn to go forward softly. If they just crawl forward, just let them crawl a few steps, wait till they stop, ask again until they're walking forward. If they leave, back them off a step, reset them until they're walking forward softly, not marching out.
Okay, and is it okay to do all this in an outside environment, or would you keep them sort of contained for a little bit, just so their focus is perhaps not too far away?
It just depends. If it was a green horse, it always has to be in a safe environment in case something goes wrong. Sometimes a bigger arena that's safe is good because there's a bit more distance that the horse suddenly wants to go, oh, there's a bit more room here, I might want to go forward. But in a really small space, they're like, oh, well, there's nowhere to go anyway. What's the point?
Okay, and they've got a question now that sort of goes on from a horse, a 6-year-old gypsy cob who's been trained in carriage driving, and it does it very well. But now Catherine is trying to get him to go under saddle and teach him and his mind and his feet to understand feel from a different position. She's finding that he's very solid when he doesn't want to move on the ground. He'll have moments of clarity and be okay, but then he breaks and it seems like his understanding shifts. She'd like to know how she can get consistent in both her asking and his responding.
So with a carriage horse, some carriage horses, especially like a quiet gypsy sort of horse, they can become so immune to a lot of things, especially because they've been in harness and all this other stuff. So there's a lot of pressure that they've learnt to turn off to, and there's only certain pressures that they turn on to, which is the guiding pressure of the reins and maybe the carriage stick or whatever that they've been driven in. But the shafts down the side, they know they're there and they're not going to stay between the shafts, but they get sort of, as I say, immune to a lot of things. So basically you've got to work out what tools you're going to use under saddle, and usually it would be using the reins from a slightly higher angle. If your horse knows how to back up, well, you've got one direction. And I think all carriage horses should know how to back up because you've got to back them into the shafts. And I've seen people who train their carriage horses to back their carriages back into the shed and stuff like that. So, you make sure you've got a good backup because that is one direction under saddle that you can ask a horse to go that's really simple that it should know under carriage, in the carriage. The other thing is you're going to be squeezing your horse's rib cage to go forward, and that's probably the area that's been dulled the most because if they're just driving from behind with a carriage stick and a voice cue, that's what the horse is used to. Now, you can tap into the voice cues and ride with a stick where the carriage whip would have been and help that horse, by part carriage, part riding, but really you want to get the part of the body that you want to use sensitized again. So that would mean I would generally put a belly rope back on the horse, and with a horse like that, you'll have to give it a few kind of like, hey, wake up, and it's going to go, what's that? On my ribs. Oh, what is it? I've got to do something, and then until you can put a little feel on that horse and lead it forward with a belly rope, that's sort of teaching it that sensitize the ribs. There's going to be questions going through your ribs that you have to search to. It's not just an area that you just block out because that's what you've done in the cart, or having girths and different things on them. So when you get the horse to carry a saddle, do belly roping first, get the horse sensitized to feel, and then kind of desensitized to the pressure of the girth, which is going to be a different pressure because it's a full constriction, opposed to a forward feel or a bit of a bump forward feel, whatever you want to do with the belly rope to get them to go forward. So get that working. And then the other thing is long reining in a different way. So a carriage horse has probably got used to being driven forward and steered in the reins like this. But if you can sort of get that horse to lead a lot better again, so the long reining where I put the reins all the way around the horse and get them to move all the way around and all the way around and follow those reins and get movement in the reins so they stay in flow with the reins from one side to the other. If you can do that, then you've got the horse following the rein all the way through, not just bending its head this way to steer it that way, bending it that way to steer it that way and pushing it along. And that'll give you, hopefully that'll start to give you the one rein start back. So you can get on your horse and not just use your rib cage, but take that rein and the horse follows that rein all the way through. So you can create movement through the left rein or the right rein. So first of all, the backup should be the most simple one. You can teach your horse to back up under saddle. So you've got movement in the backup. 2, your one rein start, which has come through your long rein. You to get your one rein start to steer them, to get them to flow. And then they'll start to flow and maybe find forward. And if you can use a little cluck, cluck or voice cue that they would have been used to in carriage, as that horse starts to follow that rein and you let the rein off, you might cluck and just sort of say, hey, you know, this is movement, and let the rein out and see if the horse carries that movement into a forward direction. And then the other thing is the belly rope, and that translates to legs. And then over time, you should get that horse back to not blocking out all that under saddle stuff.
Excellent. Now I'm going to throw in a third question here, because you mentioned the flag before and how you can use that in some of these situations where you're driving just as a stimulant. But I know you also use the flag to create awareness and to change a bit of a mindset. I've got a question here from Deb from the UK, who has a 2-year-old gelding who loves to chew the lead rope. He's very mouthy to most things. He'll pick up almost anything to investigate it. When she leads him and he's relaxed and leading well, he'll hold and mouth the lead rope. When she removes his halter, he's still chewing it. He's relaxed and he's in no rush to run off down the field. So it sounds like they get on really well and he's quite comfortable in her space. She's been working on respecting his space, as he can be nippy. So she's doing the challenges at the moment. She's up to challenge number 2. But he thinks the flag is a toy. She's introduced it when he was a foal. He loves it and he's a confident, playful horse. Do you have any ideas for him in how to respect the flag and how she should be working with it? At the moment, she stopped using it because when he sees it, she can see that he's like, oh, great, she's bought me a toy.
So I'm going to put the question back, and you probably know the answer to this, and I'm not trying to, I just want everyone to think about this. You've got a 2-year-old who sounds quite quiet, trusting, all sorts of things, but the 2 C's, the C's I talk about all the time, the curiosity and caution.
Well, she's new to the membership, so let's introduce her to those.
So I'm going to talk to you about curiosity and caution. And by the sounds of it, he's a curious, friendly little horse that's got a really playful side. But over the time of handling, he hasn't built up the right amount of caution. And it's not that you've done the wrong thing in getting him quiet and curious. A lot of times nobody does the wrong thing. It's just that with everything that we do that's right, there's another half that we should do. Okay, so and especially when it comes to curiosity and caution. So right from the get-go when he was young, and I'll explain it from when he was young so you can understand, is when they're curious young foals. I know what you want to know what to do now, but in hindsight we look back and work it through when they were young, and then we can sort of still work with him now. But when they were babies and they were cute and they were sort of like, oh, isn't that nice? When we might let them have a little sniff on us, and if it's a real cautious little sniff where they're going, oh, I wonder what that person's doing. I don't know if they're a person or not, but they look interesting, and I might come over to them. I might just let them come over really softly and have a little sniff, and then I walk away very quickly to say that's enough. If I see a young foal going, what's that thing over there that looks pretty cool on 2 legs, I might just come and blunder in. They might be cute and they might be little, but I'll say, don't come in like that, and I'll clap my hands and give them a little spook, and they'll be like, whoa, that spooked me. But then as soon as I've spooked them, I've walked off and done something else. I haven't attacked them. I haven't come at them. I'm just saying, just be aware of that. And that's where we learn our boundaries right from the get-go. Unfortunately, when they're little, we handle them a lot. They're cute. They're small. As they get bigger, they get a bit more like, there's these little habits that come in, the chewing, the nipping, the biting. And some horses can get very aggressive, later on, if because there's no caution in there right from the start. Lucky you've got the nice version of, and you haven't got the big aggressive side, but the nipping and all that, when you start them under saddle and you start to sort of present challenges to their brain, stimulants, problems to solve, that's when they can start getting aggressive, because they go, hang on a minute, I'm confused, I'm lost, and why is it like this all of a sudden? So the flag, you may have introduced it as a tool. It's like a friendly tool, but I introduce the flag to horses always as an awareness tool, not a friendly tool. I can handle a horse with a flag, I can touch them with a flag, I can get them used to things, but I don't want them to sort of think it's just some friend of theirs. It's
an extension of you.
Yeah, it's not an extension of me. It's just I can pop it and give them a little shock, get them to sort of reset, rethink. I can pop it to get establish a boundary, but I can also soften the flag and rub them over with it as well. So, so the answer to the question, going back to this, and this, I know the listeners aren't going to really, they're going to go, what? Every horse has to have an element of fear in them. Why? I'm not trying to make everyone go out and make your horse frightened of you, because I'm dealing every single day helping frightened horses and teaching people how not to make horses frightened. But if you watch a young 2-year-old go into a herd of horses that say, for instance, he's growing up in a nice little backyard herd and he's just life's a dream, he's just never had a problem to solve in his life, and he goes into a herd and he doesn't go in with caution, he could get put through a fence by another horse and put his whole life in danger. But the horse that goes into the herd with a bit of fear and caution, because remember, caution starts through a bit of fear because they're worried about hurting themselves or something happening. Once they can work their way into a herd with caution, they're accepted and they're not in danger. So the very quiet horses in the world that have been kind of handled well and they're very curious, but they haven't had caution, later on they go to being started and they might get sent to a facility where there's a lot more horses, a lot of pressure, and the breaker inner, or the trainer, the starter, has got to put them through so many weeks of pressure. Those horses really struggle because they go, I'm not used to solving problems. I'm not used to thinking under pressure and things like that. So it's great you've got the right amount of curiosity. Now we've got to work out caution. So what I would do with the flag, maybe, if I had a horse that was really kind of starting to get too interested in everything and not cautious about anything, I might be walking and on leading it one day, and I might get the flag and I might hit a drum as hard as I can out of nowhere. So it jumps and goes, what was that? And I go, well, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. And you're not coming at the horse, you're not doing something to it, but you said not everything is how you see it. Things are a little bit unstable and things are ever changing. And you start to throw environmental things in that might just sort of make the horse go, I've got to pay a bit more attention. I've got to be responsible for myself, not just kind of go, oh, there's a flag, I might follow it. Oh, there's a person, I might go and get a scratch. So you kind of got to, do little things that put a little bit of awareness in the horse, a little bit of spook, and then you pick up that lead and say, but don't worry, follow this lead and everything will be okay. And then you might get a bit more awareness back in the flag. Like I might bang it really hard out of the blue, so the horse goes, I didn't know where that came from, and then you just go quiet with it. So when the horse touches your boundary, you could do it kind of quite quick and electric that the horse didn't expect it, and then it goes, I've got to be more aware, and then you just create that awareness, and it'll be a balancing act. So once you create the awareness, it's a balancing act. So basically, if the first shock or the first time you banged a drum or something like that, the horse got a little bit frantic, well, that's in there. And people say, well, if I bang the drum, I scared the horse, and then they won't trust me. It's like, well, no, the drum scared the horse, but that horse gets scared and gets frantic. So when it goes in a trailer one day, or a float, whatever, a lorry in England, it might hear all these noises and become frantic because it doesn't know what to do. So sometimes just the random little things that you can do that suddenly shock the air a bit and get the horse to sort of, pay attention is probably going to be advantageous. And then when you've got caution, then you create a soft caution in a horse. Now, how do you create soft caution is by teaching the horse to understand certain things until it understands things, and that overrides fear, because understanding always replaces fear. So when I train young horses, I build understanding. So I know at some point they'll have trust, they'll be soft, they'll still be curious, but we won't have the fear factor all the time, because they understand their responsibility and they have a natural awareness that they find themselves without us having to do it.
I remember you saying a few weeks ago on a podcast, just have a look at their mindset, not necessarily about what you're going to train that morning, but what mindset are they in. So that might be quite pertinent to her right now, in the sense of, is he, where's his mind? Is he respectful of you, your space?
Yeah.
Let's correct that. Let's get him a bit more hyper aware, a bit more cautious, and then start training.
And just one more thing, which I think is really relevant to your horse that I don't want to miss, and for anyone else, dopamine. When we talk about dopamine seekers in people, it's like I must admit I'm a bit of one of those people too. It's like, oh, there's a problem, I might just get distracted on Facebook Marketplace or something like that. So it's very common in people. We understand what a dopamine seeker is. It's like, I don't want to go outside. It's too scary because I'm a bit of an introvert, and I've actually not been talking to people for some time. So I'm just going to go and, eat some chocolate, watch a movie, do something else. I'm going to avoid that, but I'm going to seek dopamine elsewhere. So basically it's very common in people that we can find an easy way to get our dopamine, not a hard way. So Jenny, you run, you go out and do the dopamine the hardcore way. I'm going to run, I'm going to put my body at its limit, but I'm going to get a big dopamine for it. Other people like me, at the end of the day, I'll have a beer. That's so what we've got to look at with horses can do exactly the same thing. I've seen so many horses at clinics that if they get little habits, like nibbly-dibbly habits, it's all okay, but it can be a way of them distracting themselves in play. And I've seen horses that suddenly sort of, when they're anxious, go to nibbling, go to those things, not just because they're playful. So your horse might be doing it when it's playful and it's just kind of interested and curious. Mm-hmm. But down the track, it becomes a habit that they do when they're nervous and they don't want to process their environment or things like that. So any of those little sort of habits, like, I've got a play ball for my horse in the stable so it doesn't get bored, be careful, because it can become a habit that becomes an addiction when they're anxious. And that's where all these crib biting behaviours come from with the really fried horses later on, crib biting, wind sucking, pacing, all that sort of stuff. Or pacing is more so looking somewhere else and not being able to go there. But any of those little sort of behaviours, once your horse gets the right amount of caution, it learns to process its environment. But don't let those little behaviours sort of happen all the time too often, because they can become habits.
So don't give up the flag yet. Go back to the flag, but be more effective.
Be more effective and maybe a bit random with it, in the sense that, create a bit of shock, but don't shock and chase your horse. It's just a shock that happened, like a magpie, swooping out of a tree. There
are videos of Mark showing how to use the flag more effectively. If you can't find it, Deb, send me an email. I'll let you know where they are. We'll leave it there for this week. We've covered quite a few different topics. I hope that has been helpful to you. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your time, Mark. We'll be back next week answering some more questions.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, everybody.
If you'd like to ask Mark your question and get his insights to help you and your horse, it's easy to join Mark Langley online. Head over to marklangley.com.au and hit join. It's less than a couple of coffees, and the Q&A is just a piece of a whole package designed to support you and your horse with great training.